Web Marketing That Works podcast, episode 75, with today's guest, Dion Lou.
Welcome to the Web Marketing That Works podcast. Come behind the scenes of real-life marketing experiments and listen in as amazing guests confess the truth about what really works. Now, here are your hosts, Adam Franklin and Toby Jenkins.
My name's Adam Franklin, and you are listening to the Web Marketing That Works podcast, the show for people who love marketing on the web. You'll be taken behind the scenes of real-life marketing experiments. We'll look at the good, the bad, and the ugly. We'll confess what's failed and reveal the truth about what really works. The show is brought to you by our book called Web Marketing That Works, and specifically by the bonus 33 marketing templates that go with it. So you can get your hands on those as a listener if you head over to bluewiremedia.com.au/book. Now, today's guest is a fellow Aussie called Dion Lou, and she's been on my radar for quite a while because her book came out about the same time as mine last year, and I've been following her on social media and her blog, and it was a real thrill to have her on the show today. Now, her book is called The Social Executive: How to Master Social Media and Why It's Good for Business. And I've been seeing it at airport bookstores all around the country over the last year, so she's got some fantastic visibility with that. She's actually at the same publisher as us, Wiley, so it was cool to connect and to find out more about basically what the opportunity is for business executives using social media, and I guess why there's such a gap, why there's so few business executives using it and using it effectively. So that's what Dion and I dive into in this episode of the show. So let's get straight into it. It's Adam Franklin here, and I am thrilled to be joined by Dion Lou. How are you, Dion?
I'm well, Adam. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Now, firstly, congrats on your book, which is called The Social Executive: How to Master Social Media and Why It's Good for Business. I've seen it everywhere in airports and bookshops, so firstly, congratulations.
Thank you, Adam.
Now, let's kick it off. I mean, what you talk about in the book, and obviously from the title, is business executives need to be on social media, but surprisingly, even though people like you are talking about it a lot and there's obvious benefits, so many business executives, CEOs, they're just nowhere to be found. Now, why is this, do you reckon?
Well, Adam, I think there's such a huge gap between what executives think social media is about and what it is actually about. And I did a lot of research on this for my book, and it's sort of clear to me that executives are stuck in a narrative about social media that is about, a decade old. I think that what happened is that when social media first emerged, it was very much seen as the domain of geeks and young people, perhaps, creative marketers. And even though we're sort of 13 years on from that, and social, as you would know, has become so mature and such an integral part of the digital ecosystem, it's like in the executive mindset, the story actually hasn't been updated, and all those myths are still what drives their behavior, including their absence in social media.
So aside from getting, I guess, old news that haven't got the updated story of what social media really can do you feel that fear is underpinning a lot of it for the CEOs, or is it more just ignorance?
Well, I think it's both. I think when you look at ignorance, ignorance drives fear in a sense. If you don't understand something, you're always reluctant to engage with it. But I think predominantly they haven't understood that there's a business imperative. They don't realize that there is an ROI on social. And that is, in a sense, reinforced by fear, because every time, as we know, something goes wrong on social media, it gets hugely amplified, in particular by traditional media. And a lot of CEOs and C-suite executives then tend to go back into the closet and think this is too risky. it's too dangerous. When, yes, of course, there is trolling on social media, but as you and I would know, most of the times what's going on is just business as usual, forming connections, synergies, and essentially doing business as usual.
Because I find it, amazing because, say, Twitter, for example, there's that many millions of people using it, but that's not even the staggering part. I mean, the Queen's on Twitter, the Pope's on Twitter, the President of America's on Twitter, Richard Branson's on Twitter, and they actually do some of their own tweets. And, it's such a compelling case, at least through the way I see the world and the way I see social media, that I would imagine that when CEOs realize that many good quality captains of industry, heads of state, all of that on Twitter, that just focusing on Twitter specifically for now, that, there's just that much opportunity, and never before in history have we had these opportunities to connect directly with such a huge range of people, but also such high level people. Do you think that maybe, I guess, an education thing that we need to sort of highlight some of those opportunities, or are some just not able to be convinced, do you think?
There's a really big debate about this at the moment, in particular about participation at that CEO level. And I think there is a huge education piece here. As we know, there are now so many reports that confirm that a social CEO is very positive for a company. It impacts positively perceptions of trust and reputation. So, for example, Weber Shandwick has recently found that about 81% of executives want their CEO to be social. When you start to look at the customer research coming out, research from Brand Fog, for example, shows that 2/3 of customers trust companies more if the CEO is social. And I think that that's because people have direct access to that person rather than being shrouded from the company by layers and layers of whether that's, PRs or marketers or even just hidden company layers. And not just that, but most employees, around 82% according to Statista, think that a social CEO helps to shape reputation and also drive engagement. So we know that social CEOs are viewed very positively, but as you say, they are absent. Now, depending on where you look, you'll see research that suggests anything from 15 to 30% of CEOs are in social media. And I think that's a bit of an overstatement because some of those CEOs have signed up to platforms like LinkedIn or Twitter, but then don't tweet or basically just put their CV online on LinkedIn without realizing this is a massively powerful platform where you can share your own content and engage in forums and talk directly to your customers. So I always say that, signing up to a platform and then not using it is a little bit like turning up to a networking event and standing in the corner. You've actually got to do something once you're there. So, yeah, I think there's a big education piece there for CEOs about the fact that social is perceived very positively for them. It's seen as something that they can manage, and it's something that their customers and their people would like to see them doing.
It's a great analogy of turning up to a business event and then standing in the corner. So say an executive buys into the fact that, yes, social media is good for business. It is good for me. They have signed up for their LinkedIn account. What do you suggest they actually do? Like the why bit's taken care of, but what do they do? Like once they're in LinkedIn, what sort of stuff should they be doing?
Well, again, it depends on who they are and what their strategy is, because there are two dimensions to it. One, there is your personal professional brand. So what should you be doing as Adam, or I be doing as Dion, or that particular executive be doing as themselves to build their profile and demonstrate where their skills are? And then, of course, there's the business aim, which sits alongside that, but is a little bit separate. So obviously, if you're head of marketing and you're looking after a brand on LinkedIn, you may have a different approach to if it's professional. But if I say professional, I mean personal and professional. But if you look at the personal professional brand part of it, then I think one of the things you could be doing is publishing content, your own content, which talks about what's happening in your industry, has a particular point of view around, sharing information that helps people within the industry or who are customers of the brand. A lot of executives would say that they don't have time, and I think that's a valid comment. But you don't have to publish original content all the time. I mean, it's great if you can. You can also then be a curator of great content, which means finding good content that could benefit your customers, your employees, your fellow professionals, and adding comments, sharing it, adding a particular point of view. If you look at a platform like Medal, which allows you to post the content and write commentary rather than simply just sharing the content. So there are lots of options to get involved and showcase your own skills and opinions once you're on those platforms.
And a lot of executives are terrified of doing things wrong, making mistakes and causing a big crisis. What are some of the no-nos that executives should avoid?
Well, again, it's sort of hard to call, the basics. If you're going to get involved in controversy, then you're really going to need to know your stuff and want to make a statement around it. I would say in general it's best avoided because sometimes highly charged emotional issues are the ones that will pull some of the trolls online. So controversy, again, that extends to political controversy, anything where you might create huge, emotional reactions in your community. Then again, it's hard to know sometimes what's going to go where in social. In my experience, many executives, probably most executives, have very good judgment. That's why they've become executives. And it's a matter of taking that sound judgment and bringing it into the online environment. So I don't think that's a new skill. I just think it's a new way in which to express yourself. And you've got to be prepared for the fact that what you say online is shared very quickly and is shared globally. So you've got a much wider audience. But other than that, it is similar to the way that an executive might now do a piece of public speaking or talk at a conference or something like that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point because, as you say, to get to that executive level in most companies, you do have to demonstrate a lot of skills in a lot of different areas, and communication is a very important one of those skills. And you're right, they're probably some of the best people suited to social media because they are so aware of what they say and how that can be interpreted and how that can be spread, verbally if it's at a conference or even, recorded on a smartphone. So
absolutely. And the internet is not the Wild West. I think there's sometimes a misperception that anything goes in social, and it's not true. There have been plenty of cases, for example, where people have defamed others on, social media platforms like Twitter, and those have gone to court. We had the case of the New South Wales school teacher who won a defamation case against a student. So you have to realize when you are talking on social, you are a publisher and what you say is a public statement and it counts. And again, normally what people are saying is just very useful, helpful and supportive. But where it's not, people do have recourse to the law. And I think executives knowing and understanding that is valuable for them. Again, you don't want to just create a reactionary environment where you stifle debate, but it is wrong to think that online it's just all fair game. It isn't. It doesn't work like that. You do have to be responsible for what you say.
And I guess when you are thinking about being attacked online, it probably is easier to think that there's a lot of anonymous trolls, but the reality is most of the time, if you're on Facebook or Twitter or even just in the comment section of a blog, whatever you say, whatever other people say on your blog or on social media is attributed to a person with a profile and can be contacted. So I've certainly feel there's a lot less anonymous, vicious attacks for the most part. Obviously, it does happen in a tiny situation, and that's really bad. The cyberbullying part's really bad. But for the most part, people that are interacting with you they're real people. And it's such a great point that they're accountable for what they say, just like they are with email. And, anything that you publish on email or on social media shouldn't be anything that you wouldn't want to see on the front page of the paper.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing, Adam, is that the platforms themselves have got a lot more sophisticated at managing abuse when it occurs. So I think nobody could have predicted how fast social would go, how central it would become to the way that we communicate and do everything in our lives. And so when social sort of first burst onto the scene 10 years ago, they weren't necessarily prepared for the kind of trolling that occurred. But all these years later, having had to deal with trolling and anonymity, they are more sophisticated. So, for example, on Twitter, you can mute someone, you can block someone, you can report someone. And Twitter, like Facebook and all of the social media platforms, has very strong terms and conditions which underpin usage on the platform. And so even if it's something like breach of a trademark or something like that, there are ways that you can deal with that through the social media platforms. So I think what's happening is as we become more social as a global community and as the social media networks themselves become more and more sophisticated in return, it's like we're all learning and growing together. And again, there is that level of protection now from people who do the wrong thing. And let's face it, even before social, there are always people who do the wrong thing. Fortunately, they're in the minority, but there are ways to handle that as well.
Yeah, it's really good how the social platforms are very much they're policed by the community. And as you say, if you can report stuff or block people, then it really does put the power, I feel, in the hands of the genuine users of the platform. And that's quite a reassuring aspect of it, in that I feel there's a level of comfort to be able to step into those social networks and feel like you won't be attacked or unnecessarily picked on, because there are the mechanisms there to actually, well, one, you can block them and stop them, but I feel that the greater community on those platforms will come in and support you and stick up for you should anything go a little bit wrong and you are the victim of being picked on for some reason.
That's definitely been my experience. And talking to companies who do engage through social, I've heard a similar story again and again. There's a sort of a statement that in social, the community moderates itself. And then you go out there and you realize that, that's the theory of it. Well, actually, that does work in practice, because you will see in a forum, for example, if somebody starts to get, very either defensive or negative or hostile, people within that forum will say, look, pull back a bit. We hear you. No need to, get aggro, or whatever the response is. So I think those self-moderating communities are real, and that happens in practice, absolutely.
And the repercussions can be really real as well. And I spoke in one of the earlier podcast episodes and in my book about an example where somebody posted a very violent and sexually explicit comment on a Facebook page, and it got escalated because it was threatening violence and because it was very inappropriate. It got escalated to police in this particular situation. And that person who made the comment, the police had actually been monitoring, and it led to him spending a night in jail because of something that he wrote on Facebook. So in terms of people being hostile and being aggressive, then there are very real consequences for misbehaving, and just as there are in real life. So
yeah, was that the Twitter troll or the story about the Jane Austen, the one that you were referring to there, or?
No, this was a separate incident. Yeah, this was just on a Facebook page that we were actually monitoring. Yeah, and it got escalated straight away.
Yeah, there's been similar things. There was the issue of some of the British women who had basically lobbied for the pound note to have Jane Austen's image on it when it was next updated. Don't have the full details here, but I know there was an incredible amount of trolling in relation to that. And there were death threats and all sorts of awful things that happened. The police instantly became involved and went and visited, obviously, those people who'd made those kind of threats. So again, you don't see enormous amounts of trolling in my experience, in particular when you're using social for business and for branding. But when you do, again, it's illegal to threaten someone. It doesn't matter whether you threaten them on Twitter, Facebook, or face-to-face. That is a police issue, and the police will then deal with it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, Dionne, how can people find out more about you and your book and your business?
Well, I blog at dionlou.com, dionlou.com.au, and I write for a lot of online publications for Forbes and Salesforce and Smart Company. So anyone who's interested in my work can go to my blog. I produce content on SlideShare, and obviously I'm a massive Twitter fan. I'm not sure what your favorite platform is, Adam, but that's my first love.
Yeah, mine varies actually, but yeah, Twitter is really great for connecting with people.
Yeah. So basically, I publish widely and write on my blog, so anyone who wants to connect with me can find me, well, so many places really, all over the web.
And just on a personal note, how have you found the impact of writing for websites like Forbes and Smart Company? What's the impact been for you?
Well, I'd say it's been really positive. Obviously, when you get to write for those kind of publications, you're tapping into their audience, and it's a business audience, so there's a strong synergy with what I'm writing. And it's been very good for my brand. So I think I've been very fortunate to have had the opportunity to write for a lot of these publications, because they're looking for good, well-researched content, but at the same time you get to talk to their audience, which is also your audience. So it's very positive for branding, from a branding perspective.
And then do you then take those articles and syndicate them with your own personal blog?
I do. I tend to, if I publish an article with an online publication, I'll give them some time with the content exclusively, and then I tend to put it on my blog and send it out to my own mailing lists and socialize it across all of my social media channels. So Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter are key for me, although I am on more platforms than just those three, but those are my top three. So yes, I do. I reuse the content.
That's such a great tip, I think, because often I think a lot of people get overwhelmed by, I guess, that burden of having to feed the hungry beast and creating lots of content. But really, if you can take a blog post, a guest blog post, and then, as you say, wait a few days and put it on your own site and then share that through the social networks, content can go a long way with some simple tweaks as opposed to needing to create something from scratch each time. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I plan to use it even more in the future. I'm just overwhelmed in terms of time right now. But for example, converting blog posts into SlideShare, which is a way that I think people are consuming information now. It's like, multiple tweets, but within a SlideShare pack. Works really well. Podcasting, again, is, I think, something that's huge and growing. So it's really just up to you and your imagination and how much time you have as to how you chunk up your content. But I think it is important because there is a lot of content out there. And when you write, the stuff I do is very research-based. Sometimes it'll take me a week to write a piece because I'm reading all the latest reports that come out. And I'm also trying to read not just the pro-social reports, but those that raise questions or doubts about it as well, so that I can have a really considered view. And so it takes a long time to write good content, as you well know.
Absolutely. And then I think where a lot of people fall short is forgetting to repurpose it and forgetting to promote it and forgetting the power of social media, and just a few simple extra steps there can really make sure it gets in front of more people, more of the right people.
Critical, yeah.
Well, Dionne, thank you so much for joining me today. Thanks on behalf of all of our listeners. And I will be including all the links of your book and everything else that you mentioned in the show notes. And thank you again, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks very much, Adam, and thanks for inviting me onto the show. I've really enjoyed talking with you.
Cheers. And that's a wrap for my chat with Dionne Lew. What I particularly liked about some of the stuff that Dionne shared is that it seems scary to go into social media when you're a business executive, but she outlined a whole number of reasons why you needn't be scared. Firstly, if you're an executive at a business, chances are you've already got really good people skills, you've got good communication skills, and these are the exact qualities that you need to succeed in social media. So you've got the skills built in already. Secondly, that if you do come under attack, then people are accountable to the law, just as they are in real life. So if people defame you or defame your company, then there's repercussions for those people. And 99.9% of the time, people are well behaved. So don't let those types of things worry you, because there are courses of action that can be taken to deal with those sorts of people, and just as there is in real life. I think the issue of what do executives actually do on social media was interesting, and the fact that it's important to, depending on what type of executive you're and what your strengths are, to be active on it, to be publishing some content, but doesn't have to be tons, and it doesn't have to be a burden, and it doesn't have to be this sense of guilt if you start a blog or if you start a little LinkedIn page or whatever, that you have to be posting stuff every millisecond of the day. And if you can take a really good article that you've written, or even that you've talked to somebody about, and they can help you write it, but it's your thoughts, it's your ideas as the business executive, but other people can help you write it, put it onto WordPress, and then repurpose that into SlideShare or onto infographics or whatever else. You can get your team to help out with a lot of the admin of it all and the repurposing of it all, but it doesn't have to be a burden. And the other important thing is that I loved Dionne's analogy of it's, going onto social media and setting yourself up and then not doing anything is just like heading to the business function and standing in the corner and talking to nobody. It's a waste of time. And actually, we said a couple of things after the interview, off the recording, to the words to the effect that should executives actually outsource their social media management? And Dionne and I were in complete agreement that if it's admin related, absolutely. Get people to help edit your blog posts or edit your podcasts or videos, but you can't outsource your own personality. And this is talking about the individuals. Like for a company, it's slightly different. You can have community managers and you can have people on the team. But for the business executive as a person, to outsource that would be ludicrous, because it's like sending along a third-party social media manager or PR person to business lunches or to meetings or whatever. You can't do that. It's got to be you representing yourself and talking, because that's what happens in real life. So anyway, that was one extra bit that we spoke about off the recorded call that I just wanted to share with you in the post-show chat. So that's it for this show. Thank you for joining me. And as always, our show was brought to you by our book, which is called Web Marketing That Works, and specifically the bonus 33 free marketing templates, which you can get at bluewiremedia.com.au/book. Please drop me a line if you've got any feedback, questions, or guests you'd like to suggest. I'm easily accessible at adam.franklin@bluewiremedia.com.au. And if you enjoyed the show, and I really hope you did, I would love it if you could leave us a review on iTunes, because that helps with our visibility and helps get more listeners, more downloads, and helps attract good quality guests onto the show. So thank you, and I'll see you next time.